I was the groom's sister and had just paid $60,000 for his lavish wedding. So why was the wedding planner telling me my invitation had been canceled and they'd kept every cent? The silence on the other end of the line was heavier than a tombstone. It was a cold, professional silence, the kind that lets you know you're just a name on a list, a box to be checked. I could hear the faint, elegant rustle of paper and the soft click of a high-end pen being set down on a polished desk. On my end, there was only the frantic, jackhammer pulse in my own ears. "Ma'am, are you still there?" The voice belonged to a woman named Beatrice, the wedding planner, the gatekeeper to what was supposed to be the happiest day of my little brother's life. My voice was a dry whisper. "Yes, I'm here. Could you check that again, please? The name is Sarah. Sarah Jensen. I'm the groom's sister." I said that last part like it was a password, a key that would unlock this whole ridiculous misunderstanding. The groom's sister, the one who held his hand at our parents' funeral, the one who taught him how to ride a bike and helped him with his college applications, the one who, just 3 months ago, transferred $60,000 into his and his fiancée's wedding account. This all started a year ago, when my brother Alex sat me down at our favorite Greasy Spoon diner. His eyes were sparkling in a way I hadn't seen since we were kids on Christmas morning. He slid a picture across the sticky tabletop. It was him and his girlfriend Madison on a hike, both of them beaming. On Madison's left hand, a diamond the size of a small bird's egg caught the fluorescent lights. "I'm going to ask her to marry me," he'd said, his voice thick with emotion. I was thrilled for him. Truly. Alex had been adrift since our parents passed away 5 years prior in a horrible car accident. I was older, already out of the house, but Alex was just starting college. The loss hit him hard. We only had each other, and a modest life insurance policy our parents had scrimped and saved to leave for us. I'd used my half as a down payment on a small condo, investing the rest. Alex was more of a dreamer. I'd been holding his half for him, promising him it was for something big, something life-changing. A house, a business, a future. Madison was fine. When he first introduced us, she was perfectly pleasant. She was beautiful in a very curated, Instagram-ready way. She talked a lot about brands I'd never heard of and vacation spots I couldn't afford. She seemed to adore Alex, which was all that mattered to me. But over time, I started to notice little things. How Alex's opinions started to sound suspiciously like hers. How his old, comfortable flannel shirts were replaced by crisp, designer button-downs. He was changing, molding himself into the man he thought she wanted. Then came the wedding planning. Madison had a vision, and that vision came with a price tag that made my eyes water. The venue was a historic estate that charged extra for everything, including air. The caterer specialized in deconstructed food that cost a fortune for a spoonful. Her dress, she'd gushed, was being custom-made by a designer in Paris. One night they invited me over for dinner. The air was thick with attention I couldn't place. They sat me down on the new, brutally uncomfortable minimalist sofa. Alex couldn't meet my eyes. Madison, however, looked at me with the unwavering focus of a hawk spotting a field mouse. "Sarah," she began, her voice dripping with manufactured sweetness. "We've run the numbers, and for the wedding Alex deserves, we're a little short." I knew where this was going. Alex finally looked up, his expression pleading. "Sir, we wouldn't ask, but it's our dream. It's what Mom and Dad would have wanted for me, for us." He weaponized our parents. He'd never done that before. It was a low blow, and it felt like it came straight from Madison's playbook. She placed a perfectly manicured hand on his knee, a silent show of support. "How short are you?" I asked, my stomach twisting. Madison answered before Alex could. 60,000. The number hung in the air, obscene and absurd. $60,000. For one day. I thought about the money, our parents' money, sitting in a trust account. I thought about my promise to Alex, that it was for something important. Was this important? To him, it seemed to be the most important thing in the world. He saw it as the start of his real life. I saw a mountain of debt for a party, but looking at my brother's desperate face, the only family I had left, I caved. "It's Mom and Dad's money, Alex," I said, my voice soft but firm. "It's your half. If this is what you want to use it for, then okay." The relief that washed over his face was so profound it almost made the sickness in my stomach go away. Madison threw her arms around me, her perfume suffocating. "Oh, Sarah, you're a lifesaver. You're not just a sister-in-law, you're a real sister." The next day, I transferred the money. the full $60,000. And almost immediately, things changed. My calls to Alex went to voicemail more often. When I asked for wedding updates, Madison would give me vague, polished answers. "Oh, we're handling it. Don't you worry your pretty little head about it." I was no longer invited to planning meetings or dress fittings. I was the ATM, and now that the transaction was complete, my function was served. I tried to tell myself I was being paranoid. They were just busy, stressed. But a cold knot of dread was forming in my gut. Then, 2 weeks ago, my friends and cousins started getting their invitations. They were gorgeous, of course. Thick, creamy cardstock with gold leaf calligraphy, delivered in velvet-lined boxes. They called me, gushing about how incredible it was, how they couldn't wait to celebrate. Mine never came. At first I made excuses. The mail is slow. Maybe they sent the family ones out last. But after 10 days of anxiously checking my empty mailbox, panic began to set in. I texted Alex, "Hey, just checking. Did you send my invite out?" His reply came hours later. "Yeah, OFC. Must be lost in the mail. Don't worry." It was so dismissive, so unlike him. I tried calling him. Voicemail. I called Madison. Voicemail. That's what led me here, to this phone call with Beatrice, the planner whose name was printed in tiny, elegant font at the bottom of the invitation I'd only seen pictures of. I was done being pushed aside. I was going to get an answer. "I'm sorry, ma'am." Beatrice's voice crackled back to life, pulling me from my spiraling thoughts. Her tone was clipped, efficient. "I have checked again. The groom's sister, Sarah Jensen. Yes, I have you right here." A wave of relief washed over me. "Oh, thank God. So it was just a mail issue. Can you tell me what the RSVP deadline is?" Beatrice cleared her throat. It was a small, uncomfortable sound, but it was the first crack I'd heard in her professional veneer. "Well, that's not necessary. I have a note here on your file from the bride, dated 2 weeks ago." My blood ran cold. "A note? What does it say?" Just a moment. More rustling of paper. The seconds stretched into an eternity. My knuckles were white from gripping the phone. "Ah, here it is," she said, her voice back to its neutral, detached tone. "It says your invitation was formally cancelled." I couldn't breathe. The room started to spin. "Cancelled? What does that mean? There has to be a mistake. I'm his sister. I paid for the platinum package, the venue deposit, the caterer. That was my money." The line was silent for a beat. I thought she might have hung up. But then she spoke, and her words were like shards of ice, slicing through my shock and straight into my heart. "Yes, ma'am. I can confirm the final payment of $60,000 was received and processed. The couple was very pleased. But regarding your attendance, I'm sorry. My records are very clear. Your invitation was cancelled, but they did keep your $60,000. The words hung in the air, digital and sharp, severing the last thread of hope I was clinging to. Cancelled, but they did keep your $60,000. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a statement of fact. My stomach dropped, leaving a hollow, echoing void. For a moment, all I could hear was a high-pitched ringing in my ears. "Why?" The word scraped its way out of my throat, raw and broken. Did she say why? "Ma'am." Beatrice's voice was laced with what I now recognized as practiced pity. It was the tone one uses for a problem to be managed, not a person to be helped. "I am not at liberty to discuss the private affairs of my clients. I've given you the information I have on file. Is there anything else I can help you with?" Her question was so absurd, so insultingly corporate, that it jolted me out of my stupor. "Anything else? Anything else? You've just told me that my brother and his fiancée have stolen $60,000 from me and kicked me out of their wedding. What else could you possibly help me with? Do you offer refunds for familial betrayal?" The silence that followed was frosty. "I'm sorry you feel that way," she said. The classic non-apology of someone who couldn't care less. "I will have to end this call now. I wish you the best." And with a soft click, she was gone. I stood in my kitchen, the phone still pressed to my ear, listening to the dial tone. The sound felt mocking, final. I slowly lowered my hand, my fingers numb. My gaze drifted around my small, quiet condo. The framed photo on the mantelpiece caught my eye. It was of me and Alex maybe 10 years ago, goofing off at a state fair, candy floss stuck to our faces. We looked so happy, so unbreakable. I felt a surge of white-hot rage, so intense it made me dizzy. I snatched my phone and mashed Alex's number, straight to voicemail. "Alex, call me. Call me right now. I just spoke to your wedding planner. We need to talk." I tried to keep my voice steady, but the tremor of fury was unmistakable. "Next, Madison." straight to voicemail. Her greeting was bubbly and sickeningly sweet. "Hey, you've reached Madison. I'm probably busy planning the most magical day ever. Leave a message and make it sparkle." I didn't leave a message. I couldn't trust what would come out of my mouth. Instead, I sent a text to both of them, a group message so neither could claim they didn't see it. "I know you canceled my invitation. I also know you kept the $60K. You have 1 hour to call me and explain what is going on before I do something you'll regret." An hour passed. The little read notification appeared under my message on both their ends, 2 small blue check marks of absolute contempt. But my phone remained silent. They were stonewalling me. They had my money, they had their perfect wedding, and they had decided I was no longer a part of the equation. My mind raced, replaying every interaction, every conversation for the last year, searching for the crack where this venom had seeped in. I remembered a dinner a few months back, shortly after I'd transferred the money. We were at a trendy Italian place Madison had picked out. I gently questioned the $5,000 quote she'd gotten for mood lighting. $5,000 for some string lights? I'd laughed, trying to make it a joke. For that price, they better be spun from actual gold. Madison had put her fork down with a delicate clink. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "It's about the ambiance, Sarah. It's about creating an experience." "I'm sorry if that's not something you understand." The implication was clear. I was cheap. I was classless. I'd looked at Alex, expecting him to back me up, to laugh it off with me like we always did. Instead, he just shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "Maddie knows what she's doing, sir. Let's just trust her vision." He wouldn't even look at me. That was it. That was the moment he chose her side. I was no longer his sister, his confidant. I was an obstacle to her vision. The silence from them was an admission of guilt. But why? Stealing the money was one thing, but uninviting me, publicly humiliating me, it felt personal, vengeful. They wanted to hurt me. I needed to know what they were telling people. My hand trembled as I scrolled through my contacts and found my cousin, Emily. She was sweet, a bit of a gossip, and she adored Alex. She would have gotten an invitation. She would know something. I took a deep breath and pressed call, trying to arrange my features into something resembling calm. "Sarah." "Hey, I was just thinking about you," she answered, her voice cheerful. "I was going to call and ask what you're wearing to the wedding. I'm having a total dress crisis." My stomach clenched. "Play it cool." "Oh, you know me. I'll probably just find something last minute," I said, my voice sounding impressively normal. "So you're excited then?" Excited is an understatement. Madison's last bridal shower update was insane. The ice sculptures, the string quartet for the cocktail hour. It's going to be like a royal wedding. Honestly, though, her voice dropped conspiratorially, it's a shame about that whole situation with you. I froze. What situation?" "Oh, you know," she said, a note of sympathy in her voice. "Madison told us all about it at the shower last weekend. It's just so awful. We were all heartbroken for Alex." Bridal shower. Of course, I hadn't been invited to that, either. "What did she tell you, Emily?" My voice was dangerously quiet. "Well, just that you and her had a huge falling out. She said when you gave them the money, you gave them this long list of demands, like you had to have final say on the caterer, the guest list, even her wedding dress. She said you were trying to control the whole wedding because it was your money." I could barely breathe. The lies were so audacious, so completely fabricated. "She said when she and Alex stood up to you and said it was their day," Emily continued, oblivious to the world shattering on my end of the line, "you just lost it. That you said some truly horrible things about her and her family, and that you told Alex he had to choose between you and her. Madison was crying when she told us. She said she was so devastated that your ultimatum had torn Alex's family apart. She said you disowned him." Disowned him? I didn't disown him. They ghosted me. They stole from me. "It's just so sad," Emily sighed. "And the way she's trying to make it up to Alex to give him the family he's losing. It's really sweet, actually." "What do you mean?" I whispered, a new, terrifying dread creeping in. "What is she doing?" "Oh, well, for the parent dances, it's so thoughtful. Her dad will dance with her, obviously. But then for Alex's dance, since, you know, his mom isn't here and things with you are so bad, Madison arranged for Alex to have his mother-son dance with her mom." The phone slipped from my fingers and clattered to the floor. The line went dead, but I could still hear Emily's voice in my head, delivering the final, devastating blow. It wasn't just about the money. It wasn't just about the wedding. They were replacing me. They were erasing my mother. Emily's voice echoed in my memory, one final sickeningly sweet detail. Madison even said it in her toast at the shower. It's a tribute to the only real mother figure he has now. The only real mother figure he has now. The words ricocheted around the silent room, each syllable a physical blow. Her mom. A woman I'd met 3 times who smiled with her teeth but not her eyes, and who patted my arm with a condescending pity, as if I were a stray dog she was being forced to tolerate. This woman was going to stand in my mother's place. She was going to hold my brother, sway to a song that should have been ours, while the entire room watched, believing a monstrous lie. Believing that I, the sister who had practically raised him after our parents died, had abandoned him. I sank to my knees on the cold tile floor, a choked sob escaping my lips. It was a masterpiece of cruelty. Madison hadn't just cut me out. She had meticulously crafted a narrative where she was the hero, the loving bride saving my poor brother from his crazy, controlling sister. She had poisoned my entire family against me. The unanswered calls, the sympathetic whispers from my own cousins, it all clicked into place. They weren't just ignoring me, they were shunning me based on a lie I didn't even know existed. The grief was a tidal wave, but underneath it, a different current was beginning to pull. It was cold and sharp and utterly furious. They thought they could erase me. They thought they could take our parents' legacy, $60,000 of their hard work and sacrifice, and use it to fund a party celebrating my own character assassination. They thought I would just quietly disappear. They had profoundly underestimated me. I picked up my phone, my hands shaking not with sadness anymore, but with a chilling, newfound resolve. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to plead. I was done trying to get them to answer my calls. If they wanted to communicate through lies and third parties, then fine. But I wouldn't be fighting this battle in the shadows they'd cast me into. I was going to drag it into the light. My first call was to my Aunt Carol. She was my mom's older sister, the matriarch of our side of the family. She was old school, no nonsense, and she had a built-in lie detector that could sniff out BS from a mile away. If anyone could see through Madison's performance, it was her. "Sarah, honey, I was just about to call you," she answered, her voice warm, but with an undercurrent of concern. "Emily told me she spoke with you. I have to say, I'm shocked. Absolutely shocked. What on earth is going on between you and Alex?" I took a deep breath. "Aunt Carol, what did Madison tell you?" She sighed heavily. "The same story she's apparently been spinning to everyone. That you tried to take over the wedding, that you gave Alex an ultimatum. Sarah, it doesn't sound like you. But Madison was so convincing, and Alex, he just stands there beside her, looking like a lost puppy. He won't say a word." "Because it's a lie," I said, my voice hard as steel. "Every word of it is a lie. They needed money for the wedding. I gave them Alex's half of Mom and Dad's life insurance, $60,000. The day after the money cleared, they cut off all contact with me. Then they canceled my invitation and told everyone I disowned them. They stole from me, Aunt Carol, and now they're trying to steal my family too." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could almost hear the gears turning in her head, re-evaluating everything she'd been told. $60,000, she finally said, her voice a low whistle. "Our parents' money." "Yes. And this mother-son dance with Madison's mother. That's their grand finale," I said, my voice thick with bitterness. "The final act in the play where they replace me." Another silence, this one shorter, sharper. When she spoke again, her voice was different. The concern was gone, replaced by the steely resolve I knew so well. "No, not on my watch. Your mother would climb out of her grave. This isn't just an insult to you, Sarah. It's an insult to her memory. This ends now." A plan began to form, a desperate, audacious strategy born from grief and rage. It wasn't just about getting my money back anymore. That felt secondary. This was about reclaiming my name, my family, and my mother's honor. "What are you thinking?" I asked her. "I'm thinking that a lie that big needs a very public correction," she said. "The wedding is Saturday, right? At the old Blackwood Manor?" "Yes," I said, my heart starting to pound. "Good. I'll make a few calls. Your Uncle Robert, your cousin David. People who knew your mother, who know you. People who won't be so easily fooled by a pretty face and some crocodile tears. We're not going to let them get away with this." Over the next 2 days, my condo became a command center. Aunt Carol was a force of nature. She rallied the troops, the core members of our family who had known Alex and me our entire lives. There were whispered phone calls, furious text messages, and a shared document detailing Madison's lies and the truth of the $60,000. The story was so outrageous, so galling, that belief solidified quickly into loyalty. We weren't a huge family, but we were a tight one, and Madison had just lit a match under us. The plan was simple. and in its simplicity, terrifying. We weren't going to crash the wedding. We weren't going to scream and shout. We were going to attend, not as guests, but as ghosts at the feast. On Saturday morning, I stood in front of my full-length mirror. I wasn't wearing the dress I had originally bought, a joyful, floral number, perfect for a summer wedding. Instead, I was wearing the dress I had worn to my parents' funeral. It was a simple, elegant black sheath dress. It was the only thing that felt appropriate. Aunt Carol picked me up, along with Uncle Robert. They were also in black. In the back seat were two large, professionally printed poster boards, face down. My hands were sweating. My heart felt like it was going to beat its way out of my chest. "Are you sure about this, Sarah?" Uncle Robert asked gently as we pulled up the long gravel driveway of Blackwood Manor. The place was stunning, just as opulent as Madison had described. Valets in crisp uniforms were taking cars. Guests in pastel silks and sharp suits were laughing as they walked toward the grand entrance. "I'm sure," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "They wanted a show. I'm just changing the script." We bypassed the main entrance where Beatrice, the wedding planner, was greeting guests with a clipboard and a plastic smile. We walked around the side of the sprawling mansion, following the faint sounds of a string quartet to the back terrace where the ceremony was being held. Hundreds of white chairs were arranged on a perfectly manicured lawn, facing a floral arch that must have cost more than my car. The guests were starting to take their seats. We found a spot behind a large manicured hedge that gave us a perfect, unobstructed view of the aisle and the altar, but kept us hidden from the main crowd. My cousin David and his wife met us there, their faces grim. They too were dressed in black. David was holding the posters. The music swelled. The ceremony was starting. My breath caught in my throat. This was it. There was no turning back. We watched as the bridesmaids floated down the aisle in blush pink dresses. We watched as Madison's mother, beaming, was escorted to the front row. And then we watched as my brother, Alex, walked down the aisle. He looked handsome in his tuxedo, but his eyes were dull. His smile didn't reach them. He looked like a stranger. Then came Madison. She was a vision, a confection of white lace and tulle, her face a mask of bridal bliss. She glided towards my brother, and as she took his hand, she shot a triumphant little glance over the crowd. The ceremony was a blur of platitudes and promises that felt like ashes in my mouth. My focus was singular, waiting for the one moment that would signal our move. It came after the "I do's," after the kiss, after the thunderous applause. The officiant smiled warmly and announced, "May I present for the first time Mr. and Mrs. Alex Jensen." The string quartet launched into a joyful, soaring melody. The crowd rose to its feet, cheering and clapping as Alex and Madison turned to walk back up the aisle, their faces alight with victory. "Now," Aunt Carol whispered. As one, we stepped out from behind the hedge. David and Uncle Robert lifted the two poster boards high into the air. We stood there, four figures dressed in funeral black, directly in the path of the happy couple. The cheering faltered. A confused murmur rippled through the crowd. Alex and Madison stopped dead in their tracks, their smiles frozen, then evaporating from their faces. Their eyes widened in horror as they read the words on the posters. On the first board, in large, clear letters, was a blown-up photograph of my parents on their own wedding day, radiant and in love. Underneath it, the text read, "They gave you $60,000 for a future, not for a lie." And on the second board, facing the hundreds of stunned guests, was a crystal-clear screenshot of my bank statement, the $60,000 transfer to Alex and Madison Wedding Fund, circled in bright, angry red. Beneath it, a single, damning question. Why did you uninvite the groom's sister, but keep her money? The music screeched to a halt as if the violinist had seen a ghost. In a way, he had. We were four spectres of truth at their opulent feast of lies. The silence that fell over the perfectly manicured lawn was absolute and suffocating. It was broken only by a collective gasp that rippled through the guests as they craned their necks, their eyes flicking from the beaming bride and groom to the two giant posters and the four figures in black, standing sentinel. Madison's face, which seconds before had been a portrait of bridal ecstasy, contorted into a mask of pure, unadulterated fury. Her cheeks flushed a blotchy, furious red that clashed horribly with her pristine white dress. Alex, however, just looked broken. The color drained from his face, leaving him pale and gaunt under the afternoon sun. His eyes were wide, fixed on the photograph of our parents, looking as if he'd been struck by lightning. "What is the meaning of this?" a man's voice boomed. It was Madison's father, a portly man with a florid face, already pushing his way through the stunned guests. "Security! Get them out of here!" But no one moved. The hired security guards, two beefy men in ill-fitting suits, looked uncertainly from us to the wedding planner, Beatrice, who was frantically whispering into a headset, her professional composure finally shattered. The guests were captivated, a captive audience to a drama far more compelling than any wedding ceremony. They were whispering, pointing, pulling out their phones. The story was spreading through the rows faster than a fire. "Sarah!" Madison's voice was a venomous hiss. She took a step forward, her expensive lace dress dragging on the grass. "How dare you? You are ruining my wedding." "Your wedding!" I finally found my voice. It came out colder and stronger than I expected. I took a step forward, away from the safety of my family, so I was standing alone in the aisle, directly in front of them. "You mean the wedding I paid for? The wedding you uninvited me from after you cashed my check? I think I have a right to be here." "You're insane!" she shrieked, her voice rising in pitch. "You're a liar. You were trying to control everything. You gave Alex an ultimatum." She was playing her part, reciting the lines she'd rehearsed for weeks, but her audience was no longer sympathetic. They had the receipts, literally, held high on a poster board behind me. I ignored her and looked directly at my brother. My voice softened, laden with the weight of 5 years of shared grief. "Alex, look at me. Look at them." I gestured to the photo of our parents. This was their money, their legacy. It was meant to give you a start in life, a house, a future. Not this. Not for her to buy a princess fantasy while she tells everyone I disowned you. Is that what you think happened? Do you really believe I would do that? He flinched, his eyes darting from me to Madison, then back to the poster. He couldn't speak. He just stood there, trapped between the woman he'd married and the sister he'd betrayed. "He doesn't have to answer to you," Madison snapped, stepping in front of him, physically shielding him from me. "You are a toxic, jealous person, and you are not welcome here. Get out!" "I'm not going anywhere," I said calmly. "Not until you tell these people the truth. Tell them how you took $60,000 of my dead parents' money and then kicked me out. Tell them about the mother-son dance you have planned with your mother. Go on, Madison. Tell everyone how you're honoring my mother's memory." A new wave of murmurs swept through the crowd. This was a detail Aunt Carol had strategically shared in her phone calls. The story wasn't just about money anymore. It was about a sacred family tradition being usurped. It was a line that, for many, could not be crossed. I saw a few of Madison's own relatives looking at her with expressions of dawning horror. Madison's mother, a woman who looked like a melted candle in a peach-colored dress, stood up from her front row seat. "That's a lie. Alex asked me to dance with him. He sees me as a mother." Aunt Carol stepped forward then, her voice ringing with an authority that commanded attention. "Helen, sit down. You've known that boy for 2 years. I've known him his entire life. I held him in the hospital the day he was born, just like his mother did. You are not his mother, and you will not dance in my sister's place." The raw, protective fury in my aunt's voice seemed to finally break through Alex's paralysis. He looked at me, his eyes swimming with tears. "Sarah," he whispered, his voice cracking. I didn't." "You didn't what, Alex?" Madison spun on him, her voice a low, dangerous growl. Don't you dare let her do this to us." But the spell was broken. The carefully constructed world she had built around him was crumbling. He looked at her, really looked at her, as if seeing her for the first time. He saw the ugly sneer on her beautiful face, the greed in her eyes. He saw the woman who had isolated him from the only family he had left. "You told me she was being controlling," he said, his voice barely audible. "You said she hated you. You said she made me choose." "She did," Madison insisted, her desperation mounting. "No," Alex shook his head, a single tear tracing a path down his cheek. "No, she just asked about the mood lighting." He looked at me then, a look of such profound shame and regret that it almost broke my heart all over again. "She asked about the mood lighting, and I let you turn it into this. I let you do all of this." The crowd was silent, hanging on every word. This was better than reality TV. This was real, raw, and happening right in front of them. The bride and groom imploding on the aisle. Madison saw she was losing him. She saw her perfect day, her perfect story, slipping through her fingers. She lunged forward, not at me, but at the poster Uncle Robert was holding, the one with the bank statement. She clawed at it, trying to rip it down, a wild, cornered look in her eyes. "Lies! It's all lies!" Uncle Robert, a man built like a retired dock worker, simply held the poster higher, well out of her reach. Her flailing only made her look more guilty, more unhinged. Her perfect hair was coming undone. Her veil was askew. She was unraveling in front of hundreds of witnesses. And then Alex spoke. His voice was no longer a whisper. It was clear, firm, and filled with a sorrow so deep it seemed to echo across the lawn. "Give her the money back." Madison froze, her hand still raised mid-air. She turned to him slowly, her expression one of disbelief. "What?" "The $60,000, Alex said, his gaze unwavering. "It's Sarah's. It's our parents' money. Give it back to her. Now." Madison let out a laugh, a sharp, ugly sound. "Are you out of your mind? That money is gone. It's paid for all of this. The venue, the food, the flowers, this dress. There is no money to give back." "Then we'll sell something," Alex said. "We'll sell the rings. We'll sell the car you wanted. I don't care. You are not keeping my sister's money." Madison stared at him, her jaw working silently. The fantasy was over. The prince had woken up from her spell. She looked from his determined face to my stoic one, to the sea of watching, judging eyes. And in that moment something in her snapped. She turned her venomous gaze back to me. "You," she seethed, her voice low and trembling with rage. "You think you've won, don't you? You came here and blew up my life, humiliated me in front of everyone I know. But you don't get to have the moral high ground. You don't get to be the victim." She took a deep, shuddering breath, a malicious, triumphant glint appearing in her eyes. "You want to talk about lies, Sarah? Let's talk about the biggest lie of all. The one your precious brother has been keeping from you for the last 5 years. The real reason he needed that money from you so badly." She paused for dramatic effect, letting the hook sink in. My blood ran cold. I looked at Alex. He was shaking his head frantically, his face a mask of sheer panic. "Madison, no, don't." But she just smiled, a cruel, sharp smile that didn't touch her eyes. "Ask him about the accident, Sarah," she said, her voice dripping with poison. "Ask him what really happened the night your parents died." The world tilted on its axis. Madison's words, sharp and deliberate, sliced through the stunned silence, targeting the one wound in my life that had never truly healed. The accident. The one topic Alex and I never, ever discussed. The black hole at the center of our family. My gaze snapped to Alex. The shame and regret on his face had been replaced by a stark, primal terror. He was ashen, his mouth opening and closing silently, like a fish gasping for air. He was looking at me, his eyes pleading, begging me not to believe her, not to listen. "What is she talking about, Alex?" I asked, my voice a strained whisper. The poster boards, the money, the wedding, it all faded into the background, becoming insignificant noise. There was only this sudden, gaping chasm opening between us. "She's lying, Sarah. She's just trying to hurt you," he choked out, taking a clumsy step towards me. But Madison moved faster, grabbing his arm, her manicured nails digging into the fabric of his tuxedo. "Am I, Alex? Am I lying?" she cooed, her voice a sickly, sweet poison. She turned her triumphant gaze back to the rapt audience, many of whom were now openly recording on their phones. "You see, everyone, this isn't about money, this is about secrets. This perfect family has a secret so dark, so ugly." "Shut up, Madison," I yelled, my voice cracking. I didn't want to hear it. I didn't want this sacred, painful piece of our history to be weaponized by this venomous woman in a $5,000 dress. But it was too late. She had the stage, and she was going to play her final, devastating scene. "The police report was so simple, wasn't it?" she continued, her voice resonating across the lawn. "A tragic accident. A deer ran out onto a dark country road. Your father swerved. The car hit a tree. Case closed. So neat. So tidy. Every word was a hammer blow, chipping away at the fragile peace I had built around that night. I remembered the state trooper at my door, his hat in his hands, his face a mask of professional sympathy. I remembered the words, 'No survivors,' echoing in the sterile quiet of the hospital waiting room. But they left something out of the report, didn't they, Alex?" Madison's grip on his arm tightened. "Something you never told anyone. Not even your beloved sister." I could feel my family closing ranks around me. Aunt Carol put a steadying hand on my back. Uncle Robert lowered the posters, the public shaming forgotten in the face of this deeply personal attack. "Stop it," Alex pleaded, his voice cracking. "Please." He wasn't supposed to be there, Madison announced, her voice ringing with theatrical revelation. You see, Alex had a fight with his parents that night. A big one. About his grades, about his future. So, he did what any rebellious teenager would do. He stole his dad's beloved vintage Mustang, the one he was never allowed to touch, and went joyriding with his friends. My mind flashed back. I remembered the Mustang. Dad's pride and joy. I hadn't even thought about it at the time, too consumed by grief to notice its absence from the garage. They were on their way to pick him up. Madison's voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. He'd called them from a party, drunk and scared, after his friend had crashed the Mustang into a ditch miles away. They got in their sensible sedan and drove out into the night to rescue their screw-up son. And on that dark road, on their way to clean up his mess, they met that deer. The air left my lungs. A wave of nausea washed over me. It couldn't be true. Alex would have told me. We told each other everything. We were all we had left. He never told you, did he, Sarah? Madison sneered, seeing the dawning horror on my face. He let you believe it was just a random, senseless tragedy. He let you grieve for them without ever knowing the truth, that they wouldn't have even been on that road if it wasn't for him. He let you comfort him, take care of him, give him your inheritance, all while he was hiding the fact that he was the reason they were dead. I stared at my brother, my little brother, who now looked like a stranger. The terrified boy I saw was superimposed over the memory of the heartbroken teenager who had clung to me at the funeral, his body racked with sobs. Had they been tears of grief or of guilt? Alex? The single word was all I could manage. It was a question, a plea, a demand. He finally ripped his arm out of Madison's grasp. He stumbled forward, his face a mess of tears and sweat. He fell to his knees on the grass in front of me, right there in the wedding aisle, his tuxedo jacket covered in dirt. "I'm sorry," he sobbed, his voice muffled by his hands. "I'm so sorry, Sarah. I was going to tell you. So many times I was going to tell you. But I was scared. I was so scared you would hate me." The truth of it, the sheer weight of his confession, crashed down on me. 5 years. For 5 years he had carried this. For 5 years every hug, every shared memory, every quiet moment of grief had been underpinned by this colossal, life-altering lie. The $60,000 wasn't just for a wedding. It was blood money. It was his penance, a way to use their legacy to buy a new life, a new family, a fresh start away from the guilt that was clearly eating him alive. And Madison had known all along. She hadn't just used his money. She had used his guilt, holding his darkest secret over him like a sword. "You knew," I said, my voice flat and dead. I looked past my sobbing brother at the woman in white. "You knew this whole time, and you used it." Madison just shrugged, a flicker of triumph in her eyes. A girl's gotta have leverage. The callousness of her statement was breathtaking. The cruelty, so profound it was almost artful. She hadn't just exposed my brother, she had annihilated him, right here, in front of everyone, on what was supposed to be the happiest day of their lives. And then, as Alex continued to sob at my feet, an even more horrific thought bloomed in the back of my mind, a chilling, logical extension of Madison's cruelty. Her lies about me, her calculated campaign to isolate Alex from his family. It suddenly seemed like more than just a greedy cash grab. It was strategic. "The money," I said slowly, the pieces clicking into place with sickening clarity. "You pushed for it. You said Alex deserved it. Why was it so important to you, Madison? Why did you need that $60,000 so badly?" She folded her arms, a smug look on her face. "A wedding like this isn't cheap, sweetie." "No," I said, shaking my head. I looked at Alex, still crumpled on the ground. "No, it wasn't just for the wedding, was it?" I looked back at her, my eyes narrowing. "You weren't just taking my money. You were trying to pay someone off." Madison's smug expression flickered. For the first time, a sliver of genuine fear showed in her eyes. "His friend," I whispered, the realization hitting me with the force of a physical blow. The friend who was in the Mustang with him. The one who crashed it. He was the only other person who knew the truth. That's who the money was for, wasn't it? You weren't buying flowers and ice sculptures, Madison. You were buying silence. The moment the words left my lips, I knew they were true. It was in the sudden, sharp intake of breath from Madison. It was in the way Alex's sobbing hitched, his head snapping up to look at me with wide, terrified eyes. The smug mask of the victorious bride shattered, replaced by the panicked face of a cornered animal. "You're crazy," she stammered, her voice losing its sharp, confident edge. "You're making things up. You're just trying to deflect from what your pathetic brother did. But the seed of doubt had been planted, and it was taking root in the fertile ground of her public implosion. The guests were no longer just watching a family drama. They were listening to the outline of a potential crime. Phones were now being held up not just to record, but to document. Am I? I took a step closer, my voice dropping, low and intense. Let's think about this. A 5-year-old secret, known only by 2 people, my brother, who is drowning in guilt, and his friend. Who was this friend? Alex. I looked down at him, my tone softening slightly. Not with forgiveness, but with a clinical need for the truth. Who was in the car with you? Alex looked from me to Madison, utterly lost. He was a ship torn from its moorings, adrift in a storm of his own making. Mark, he mumbled, his voice hoarse. Mark Renner. The name meant nothing to me, but I saw a flicker of recognition in the eyes of some of our cousins. Mark Renner. He'd been a couple of years ahead of Alex in high school, a guy with a reputation for being slick, always looking for an angle. Mark Renner, I repeated, turning my full attention back to Madison. He comes back into town a few months ago, right? Right around the time you and Alex started getting really serious about the wedding budget. He runs into Alex, they catch up, and suddenly this old secret becomes a new problem. How much did he want, Madison? 20,000? 30? Or was it the whole 60? I don't know what you're talking about, she insisted, but her denial was weak, her eyes darting around nervously, searching for an escape that wasn't there. You couldn't go to the police, I continued, laying out the narrative for the enthralled crowd, because that would mean Alex's secret comes out. You couldn't tell me because you knew I'd never give you a dime for blackmail, so you concocted this story, the dream wedding, the fairy tale. You inflated every cost, you invented expenses, and you convinced my guilt-ridden brother that this was the only way to pay for the wedding and pay off the man who could ruin his life. Madison's father, who had been standing by, red-faced and impotent, finally surged forward again. That's enough. This is slander. I'll sue you for every penny you have. Be my guest, Aunt Carol said, stepping in his path. I'm sure the discovery process will be very illuminating. Her calm, steely demeanor was more intimidating than any shouting could ever be. He faltered, sputtering, and fell silent. The pieces were all there, a disgusting, twisted puzzle. My exclusion wasn't just about cruelty, it was a practical matter. They couldn't have me around, asking questions, looking at invoices, wondering why the mood lighting cost as much as a used car. They had to cut me out, and the most effective way to do that was to utterly destroy my credibility first. They made me the villain so no one would listen when I started questioning the budget. The mother-son dance, I said, the final sickening realization dawning. That wasn't just about replacing me. It was a performance for Alex, a way to show him that you were giving him a new family, a better mother, a life worth paying for. You weren't just his fiancée. You were his savior. Alex looked up at Madison, his face a canvas of dawning horror. He was finally seeing her, not as the beautiful woman he loved, but as a puppeteer who had been pulling his strings, using his deepest shame as her personal leverage. Is it true, he whispered, his voice cracking with a new kind of pain, the pain of betrayal. The money. Was it for Mark? Madison looked at him, and for a fleeting second her mask of fury and panic fell away, revealing a chilling emptiness beneath. There was no love there, no sympathy, only cold, hard calculation. She had made a bet, and it had failed. She let out a short, bitter laugh. Of course it was for Mark, you idiot. Did you really think I wanted to spend 60 grand on canapes? He was going to tell her. He was going to tell everyone. I did what I had to do to protect you, to protect us. You didn't protect me, Alex said, his voice gaining a sliver of strength. You used me. You used my parents' memory. You used my sister. He slowly, painfully, got to his feet. He looked small and broken in his ridiculous tuxedo, but for the first time that day, he stood on his own. He took off the ridiculously expensive floral boutonniere from his lapel and let it drop to the grass. The sound of a distant siren began to cut through the afternoon air. It was faint at first, a barely perceptible whine, but it was growing steadily louder. Someone had called the police. Beatrice, the wedding planner, was now pale, realizing her perfectly orchestrated event had devolved into a public confession of blackmail and emotional abuse. Madison heard it too. Her eyes widened in genuine panic. This was no longer a family squabble she could spin. This was real. This had consequences. She looked at the crowd. at their phones, at the approaching flashing lights reflected in the windows of the manor. She was trapped. She did the only thing she could. She turned and ran. Her pristine white dress was a liability now, the long train tangling around her ankles. She kicked off her heels, stumbling on the soft grass, and bolted, not back up the aisle, but across the lawn, towards the sprawling woods that bordered the estate. It was a mad, desperate flight, the fairy-tale princess escaping her own self-made nightmare. The guests stood in stunned silence, watching her go. Alex took a half-step as if to follow, then stopped, his shoulders slumping in defeat. It was over. All of it. The police cars, 2 of them, pulled up the gravel drive, their lights flashing silently now. 2 officers got out, their expressions grim and professional as they surveyed the bizarre scene. The bride fleeing into the woods, the groom covered in dirt, a family in funeral attire, and 100 guests holding up their phones. My job was done. The truth, in all its ugly, complicated horror, was out. I felt a profound, hollow exhaustion settle over me. I turned to my aunt, ready to go home, ready for this nightmare to be over. But as I turned, my eyes fell on Alex. He was just standing there, looking at me, his face a wreck of tears, guilt, and a desperation so profound it was terrifying. He knew what was coming. The police would have questions. The story of the accident would come out. The lie he had lived with for 5 years was over, and he was about to face the consequences. He took a step towards me, his hand outstretched. "Sarah," he whispered, his voice begging for an anchor in the storm that was about to consume him. "Don't leave me." And as the police officers began walking purposefully towards us across the manicured lawn, I looked at my brother, the boy I had raised, the man who had betrayed me, the stranger who shed my parents' blood, and I knew this story wasn't over. A choice had to be made. Right here, right now, in the ruins of this disastrous wedding. A choice that would define the rest of our lives. My Aunt Carol put a gentle hand on my arm. "It's time to go, honey. You've done enough." But I couldn't move. I just stared at my brother as the uniformed officers got closer, their faces unreadable. One of them looked directly at me. "Ma'am," he said, his voice calm but firm, "can you tell me what's going on here?" The officer's question hung in the air, a stark official line drawn between the chaotic emotion of the last hour and the cold reality of the law. "Can you tell me what's going on here?" All eyes were on me, the guests, my family, the shell-shocked groom, and now the police. In this moment, I was the narrator. I held the power to frame the story, to decide who was the victim and who was the villain. My brother's eyes were locked on mine, pleading. They were the same eyes that had looked up at me after he'd scraped his knee as a child, the same eyes that had brimmed with tears at our parents' funeral. For 5 years those eyes had hidden a terrible truth, but in this moment they held only raw, unadulterated fear. He was no longer Madison's puppet, or a groom in a fancy suit. He was just a terrified young man, watching his life unravel. I looked past him, at the woods where Madison had disappeared. She was the architect of this pain, the one who had twisted a family's grief and a brother's guilt into a weapon for her own gain. Then I looked at the police officers, their hands resting calmly on their belts, waiting for an answer. I could tell them everything. The blackmail, the $60,000, the reason my parents were on that road. I could hand my brother over to them, let the justice system sort through the wreckage. A part of me, the part that was screaming with the pain of betrayal, wanted to do just that. Let him face the consequences, let him understand the true cost of his silence. But then I looked at the photograph on the poster board, which someone had gently propped against a chair. My parents, young and vibrant, smiling on their wedding day. What would they want? They wouldn't want Madison to get away with her cruelty, but would they want their son's life destroyed over a mistake he made as a stupid, scared teenager? A mistake he had paid for every single day for 5 years with a private, soul-crushing guilt? I took a deep breath, the manicured lawn and the gawking faces fading into a blur. There was only one path forward that didn't involve utterly annihilating what was left of my family. "Officer," I said, my voice clear and steady. "My name is Sarah Jensen. This is my brother, Alex." I gestured to him. Today was supposed to be his wedding day. There seems to have been a financial disagreement between my family and the bride. The officer raised an eyebrow. "A financial disagreement?" he repeated, his gaze sweeping over the funeral attire and the incriminating posters. "Looks a little more than that, ma'am. The bride, Madison, has a history of being financially irresponsible." I chose my words carefully. She convinced my brother and me to contribute a significant amount of money to this wedding. When I started asking for receipts and questioning the exorbitant costs, she panicked. She uninvited me, told my family I had disowned my brother, and tried to isolate him from us. Today we came here to confront her about it publicly. She couldn't handle the truth, and as you saw, she ran. I was editing the story in real time. I cut out the blackmail, the friend, and the accident. That was our secret to deal with, our private tragedy, not a spectacle for the police and a crowd of strangers. This was about the money. This was about Madison. The officer looked from me to Alex, who was staring at me with a dawning, incredulous gratitude. So, you're alleging fraud? I'm alleging that my $60,000 is unaccounted for, I said firmly. I have bank statements proving the transfer. I'd be very interested to see the invoices and contracts she signed with the vendors for this event. I have a strong suspicion that the numbers won't add up. This was a language the police understood. It was clean, simple, and provable. It was no longer a messy family drama. It was a white-collar crime scene with a floral arch. The officer nodded slowly. And the bride's name? Madison Thompson, I said. Soon to be Madison who knows what, I suppose. He conferred with his partner, their voices low. Then he turned back to us. All right. We're going to need to take your full statement, ma'am. And yours, sir, he said, looking at Alex. We've got units searching the perimeter of the woods for Miss Thompson. Over the next 2 hours, the wedding of the year officially became a crime scene. The remaining guests were dismissed, their whispers and backward glances following us as we were escorted into the Manor's grand library to give our statements. Aunt Carol and Uncle Robert stayed with me, providing corroborating testimony about Madison's manipulative behavior and the story she had spun. Alex was interviewed separately. I had no idea what he was saying, but I had given him an out. I had given him a version of the story that protected him from the worst of the fallout, and I could only hope he was smart enough to stick to it. When we were finally done, the sun was setting, casting long, dramatic shadows across the abandoned wedding feast. The caterers were packing up untouched food, the string quartet was packing their instruments, and a single police car remained at the end of the long drive. Madison was still missing. They'd found her shoes and her torn veil near a creek at the edge of the property, but she had vanished. Aunt Carol drove us home in a heavy silence. I sat in the front, staring out at the darkening landscape, while Alex sat in the back, a ghost in his own life. When we pulled up to my condo, he didn't move to get out. I'll go inside, Aunt Carol said, giving my shoulder a supportive squeeze before quietly letting herself out. I turned in my seat to face my brother. His face was blotchy and tear-stained, his expensive tuxedo rumpled and dirty. He looked like a little boy playing dress-up. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "After everything I did. You didn't. You saved me." "I didn't save you, Alex," I said, my voice devoid of warmth. "I just stopped Madison from destroying what was left of our family. That's not the same thing." The shock was wearing off, and the cold, hard knot of betrayal was settling deep in my stomach again. "The accident, the lie. For 5 years, Alex. How could you?" "I was a kid," he sobbed, fresh tears streaming down his face. "I was 16. I was drunk and stupid, and I killed them. That's what it felt like. And when you came to the hospital, you were so strong. You were holding everything together. I couldn't break you with that. I couldn't tell you that it was my fault. And then, the longer I waited, the harder it got. The lie became normal." "Normal?" I echoed, the word tasting like poison. "Our entire life together for the last 5 years has been a lie. Every time we talked about them, every holiday, every anniversary of their deaths. You were acting." "No," he insisted, leaning forward. "No, I was grieving. I was just grieving with 100 times more guilt. Sarah, I know I don't deserve it, but please, please just let me try to make this right." I looked at his desperate, broken face, and I felt nothing but a vast, empty exhaustion. Forgiveness was a continent away, a place I couldn't even imagine reaching. "Go home, Alex," I said, turning to face the front. "I can't do this right now." The next few days were a blur of legalities. I hired a lawyer. We filed a formal fraud complaint. The police had opened a missing person case for Madison, but it quickly became clear she was a fugitive, not a victim. Her parents weren't talking, and her bank accounts had been emptied. The wedding vendors started calling, looking for payment. It turned out Madison had paid most of them only the initial deposits. The $60,000 hadn't gone to mood lighting or Parisian lace. A forensic accountant hired by my lawyer quickly discovered where a large portion of it had gone. A single wire transfer of $45,000 made 2 months ago to an account belonging to one Mark Renner. Blackmail, paid in full. The remaining $15,000 had been frittered away on designer bags, a lavish bachelorette party in Miami, and a down payment on a new sports car for her. Not a single cent had gone to the wedding itself beyond the initial deposits. She had been building an escape fund all along. Alex moved out of the apartment he had shared with Madison and was staying on a friend's couch. He called and texted me every day, long rambling messages of apology and self-loathing. I didn't respond. The silence between us was a chasm, filled with 5 years of unspoken truths. About a week later, I was at my lawyer's office, signing another mountain of paperwork, when my phone rang. It was an unknown number with an out-of-state area code. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. "Sarah Jensen," a man's voice asked. It was slick, confident. "Who is this?" "My name is Mark Renner." My blood ran cold. I sat bolt upright in the chair, my lawyer looking at me with concern. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice dangerously low. "Relax," he said with a little chuckle. "I'm not looking for trouble. In fact, I'm calling to offer my help. I saw the news about the wedding. Messy stuff. Look, Maddie played us all. She told me she was getting the money from a family trust, a little advance on her inheritance to help Alex out. I had no idea she was shaking down his sister. That's not my style." "What is your style, Mark? Blackmail?" I shot back. "Hey, I was just a guy with some valuable information. Alex made a mistake, a big one. I kept my mouth shut for 5 years out of, let's call it friendship. But friendship doesn't pay the bills. Look, the point is, Madison is a piece of work. She screwed over your brother, she screwed over you, and you know what? She screwed me over too." "What are you talking about?" "That 45 grand she sent me. It was supposed to be 60. She promised me the whole chunk Alex was getting. She shorted me 15 grand. And I know where she is, Sarah. She's not some criminal mastermind. She's hiding out at her family's old ski cabin up in Vermont. And for that missing $15,000, I'll give you the address." Mark Renner's offer hung in the air, a greasy proposition wrapped in a veneer of mutual interest. He wanted his missing 15 grand. What did I want? Justice? Revenge? Closure? The thought of Madison hiding out in a cozy ski cabin, likely funded by the dregs of my parents' money, made my blood boil. But the idea of paying a blackmailer to find a thief felt like sinking deeper into the same murky water they all inhabited. "I'm not giving you a dime, Mark," I said, my voice cold. My lawyer, a sharp woman named Miss Albright, was now leaning forward, listening intently, a pen poised over a legal pad. "Your loss," he said with a sigh that was meant to sound nonchalant but was tinged with frustration. "Thought we could help each other out. Well, if you change your mind and feel like forwarding my finder's fee from whatever you recover, you have my number." He hung up. I relayed the entire conversation to Miss Albright. Her eyes lit up with a predatory legal gleam. "He just made 2 mistakes," she said, tapping her pen. "First, he admitted to extortion on a recorded line because my office records all incoming calls. Second, he gave us a location, Vermont. That narrows the search area for the authorities considerably." She made a call. Within minutes, the Vermont State Police were being looped in. Mark Renner, in his greedy attempt to double dip, had just become the star witness in the case against both himself and Madison. While the wheels of justice began to turn, I had my own mess to deal with. The chasm between Alex and me remained. His daily unanswered texts were a constant painful reminder of the fractured state of our family. He had betrayed my trust in the most profound way possible, and yet he was my brother. The last piece of my immediate family. Could I let him just drift away, consumed by guilt, or was there something left to salvage in the wreckage? I did something I hadn't done in years. I drove to the cemetery. The grass was green and neatly trimmed. I stood before the simple, shared headstone of our parents, the silence of the place a stark contrast to the noise of the past few weeks. I traced their names with my fingertips, and I talked. I told them everything. About Alex's secret, about Madison's cruelty, about the $60,000. I told them how angry I was, how hurt, and how utterly lost I felt. And in the quiet stillness, standing there alone, an answer began to form. Forgiveness wasn't a feeling. It was a choice. It wasn't about absolving Alex of what he'd done. It was about choosing not to let his mistake, his 5-year-long lie, poisoned the rest of my life. It was about choosing family, however broken, over the isolating bitterness of resentment. That evening I texted Alex for the first time in weeks. "Meet me at the diner. 1 hour." He was already there when I arrived, sitting in our old booth, the one with the tear in the red vinyl. He looked like he hadn't slept in a week. He stood up when he saw me, his expression a mixture of hope and terror. "Sarah," he started, but I held up a hand and slid into the booth opposite him. "I'm not here to yell, Alex," I said, my voice even. "I'm here to tell you how it's going to be. You lied to me for 5 years. You let a stranger into our lives who tried to tear us apart and steal our parents' legacy. You broke my trust. That isn't going to be fixed overnight, or maybe ever. Not completely." He flinched but nodded, accepting the words like a deserved punishment. "But," I continued, "you are my brother, and Mom and Dad would not want us to be like this. They wouldn't want their memory to be the reason their children fell apart. So, here's the deal. You are going to start therapy. You are going to deal with the guilt and the grief you've been carrying alone. You're also going to get a job, 2 jobs if you have to, and you are going to pay back every single cent of that $60,000. Not to me, to a trust fund we are going to set up in our parents' name for their future grandchildren. It might take you the rest of your life, but you will honor them, and you will do the work to earn back my trust, one day at a time." Tears streamed down his face, but for the first time they weren't tears of guilt or fear. They were tears of relief, of release. "Okay," he whispered. "Okay, Sarah, whatever it takes." The resolution of the legal matters was swift and satisfying. The Vermont State Police found Madison hiding out in her family's cabin, just as Mark had said. Confronted with the evidence, including Mark's recorded confession and the mountain of financial proof, she folded. To avoid a messier trial, she pleaded guilty to fraud and theft by deception. Most of the remaining money was recovered. Her parents, deeply embarrassed by the public scandal, quietly paid the difference to make the civil suit disappear. Madison was sentenced to 2 years of probation, a hefty fine, and court-ordered restitution to the wedding vendors she'd stiffed. Her fairy tale ended not with a prince, but with an ankle monitor. Mark Renner was arrested on charges of extortion. Faced with his own recorded words, he also took a plea deal, receiving a lighter sentence in exchange for his full cooperation. Life began to find a new normal. Alex kept his word. He started seeing a therapist twice a week. He got a job at a construction company, working long, hard hours, and every 2 weeks, he would send me a screenshot of the deposit into our new trust fund. They were small amounts at first, but they were consistent. He was showing up. He started calling, not to apologize, but just to talk. He'd tell me about his day, ask about mine. They were hesitant, fragile conversations, the first new bricks being laid on a foundation of ruins. One Saturday, about 6 months later, he called me. "Hey, Sar, are you busy? I'm at the cemetery. I thought, if you weren't doing anything, you could meet me." I found him standing in front of our parents' headstone, holding a small bouquet of my mother's favorite daisies. He had cleaned the stone, wiping away the dust and leaves. He looked healthier. The haunted look in his eyes was gone, replaced by a quiet, somber resolve. We stood there in silence for a few minutes, side by side. "I told them," he said finally, his voice quiet. "I told them everything. What I did. How scared I was. How sorry I am." He turned to me, his eyes clear. "And I told them about you, how you saved me from myself, how you're the best sister anyone could ever ask for, and how I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to be the brother you deserve." He held out the daisies. "These are for you, to put down, if you want." I took the small bouquet. The flowers were bright and cheerful. I knelt and placed them at the base of the headstone. As I stood up, my brother was standing beside me, his shoulder just inches from mine. And for the first time in a very long time, it felt right. The chasm between us was still there, a long, jagged scar, but we had started to build a bridge. It was a slow, painful process, but it was real. We stood together, the children of the 2 people buried beneath our feet, 2 broken pieces of a family, finally starting to heal.